The silence I had purchased was not the absence of sound, but the presence of everything else. It was the vast, profound quiet of the high desert. A silence so deep, you could hear the whisper of your own blood and the distant, patient turning of the stars. I had come to Starfall Meadows to escape noise, the clamor of academic politics, the frantic chase for grant money, the endless, soul-crushing hum of a world that valued publication counts over pure discovery. Here, under a sky of impossible clarity, I could finally listen. My name is Dr. Eris Thorne. For 30 years, I was an astrophysicist caught in the machinery of institutional science. I loved the work, but I had grown weary of the game. My retirement was a calculated escape. I funneled my life savings and the entirety of my pension into a remote plot of land and a single, magnificent instrument, a private, 12-meter radio telescope. It was my magnum opus, a great white ear turned toward the cosmos, custom-built to listen for the faintest, oldest signals, free from the committees and compromises that had defined my career. Here, I would pursue the quiet, patient work of finding a whisper in the static. The installation was a week of controlled, beautiful chaos. A team of trusted engineers, old friends from my university days, assembled the dish with the precision of watchmakers. When the final parabolic panel was bolted into place, I felt a sense of completion that no academic honor had ever given me. It stood gleaming in the desert sun, a monument to a lifetime of looking up. I was performing the final systems check on the dish's delicate receiver when the crunch of tires on my gravel driveway announced an unwelcome visitor. A golf cart, the vehicle of choice in our car-restricted community, pulled to a halt. The woman behind the wheel surveyed my observatory with an expression of visceral horror, as if she had discovered a toxic waste dump on a pristine beach. She was impeccably dressed in earth-toned linen, her face shielded by a wide-brimmed hat, her posture radiating an unyielding, proprietary authority. "I am Meredith Finch," she announced, her voice as sharp and dry as the desert air. She remained seated, her hands gripping the steering wheel. "I am president of the Starfall Meadows Homeowners Association." "Eris Thorne," I replied, offering a nod. "I'm the new owner." "Owner of what?" "Precisely," she shot back, her gaze fixed on the dish. "That industrial monstrosity. What is it?" "It's a radio telescope," I said, a note of pride in my voice. "It is an eyesore," she declared, "Mrs. Thorne." "Dr. Thorne," I corrected, a reflex from years of defending my credentials. Her eyes narrowed. "Doctor, it doesn't matter. What matters is that this thing is an abomination. It is a violation of the entire ethos of this community. We fought for years to have this valley protected, to keep it free from the visual and electronic pollution of the modern world. My husband and I led the effort to have this area designated a National Dark Sky Preserve. We failed, thanks to bureaucratic incompetence. But we maintain those standards ourselves here. Our covenants are designed to ensure perfect, natural, unspoiled harmony." Her backstory, delivered with the bitterness of a fresh wound, reframed her objection instantly. This wasn't just an aesthetic preference. This was personal. My observatory was a symbol of the very technological encroachment she had failed to defeat. "I assure you, Mrs. Finch, my work depends on the very harmony you're trying to protect." I explained. "The dark skies and lack of radio interference are precisely why I chose this location. You have chosen it to erect a monument to everything we stand against," she said, her voice trembling with a passion that was almost frightening. "Our bylaws are very clear regarding structures and satellite dishes. This is your one And only warning. That thing needs to go. She reversed the cart in a furious spray of gravel and sped away. I stood in the shadow of my great dish, the silence of the desert now filled with a new, terrestrial static. I had spent my life searching for signals from distant, dying stars. I had not anticipated that the greatest source of interference would come from a woman in a golf cart. A woman whose own failed crusade had just become my new, unwelcome war. Meredith Finch's first line of attack was, as I expected, the HOA's Book of Covenants, a document she wielded with the certainty of a fundamentalist. The violation notices began arriving with a grim, predictable rhythm, each one a new and more imaginative interpretation of the rules. A clear sign that this was not about compliance, but about attrition. The opening salvo was a $500 fine for the unapproved satellite dish, citing the bylaw she had quoted on her first visit. Along with the formal notice was a personal, typed addendum from Meredith. As per our conversation, your structure is in violation of the size limitations for satellite receivers. The board expects a plan for its removal within 30 days. I responded not with anger, but with the patient, methodical approach of a scientist. I wrote a detailed letter explaining the technical distinctions between a passive radio telescope and a television satellite dish. I included diagrams. I cited the FCC's own definitions. I even, in a gesture of goodwill, offered to stop referring to it as a dish and instead use the term observatory array in all our correspondence, hoping a simple change in semantics might appease her. I realized, attempting to apply logic to an emotional problem, a classic academic's mistake. Her response was to ignore my letter entirely and issue a second fine for $1,000 for the ongoing violation. This was not a negotiation. It was a siege. Her attacks then grew more creative. I received a fine for the observatory's concrete foundation, which she classified as an unapproved ancillary structure, whose brutalist, functional design was not in keeping with the community's mandated desert modern aesthetic. Another notice fined me, because the gleam of the white dish at sunset was, she claimed, creating a visual disturbance for her property 2 miles away. It was during this time that her own backstory came into sharper focus. I had a brief, polite conversation with a neighbor at the community mailbox, a retired lawyer named Samuel, who had been on the original planning committee for Starfall Meadows. "You have to understand, Meredith," he told me, his eyes filled with a weary pity. She and her husband Richard sank a fortune into the Dark Sky Preserve initiative. They saw it as their legacy. When it failed in the state legislature, it almost broke her. She sees this place, this HOA, as her chance to build that preserve herself. Rule by rule, your observatory. To her, it's not just an eyesore. It's a personal failure made manifest. It's the cell tower she couldn't stop, the housing development she couldn't block. This knowledge was a key piece of data. I was not dealing with a simple power tripper. I was dealing with a woman haunted by a profound sense of failure, and her harassment was a desperate transference of that failure onto me. This understanding prompted me to make a significant concession. I sent a formal letter to the board, offering to have the dish professionally painted a neutral gray to reduce its reflectivity, despite the negative impact it would have on the instrument's thermal stability. The response was a fine for offering to use a paint color not on the pre-approved earth tone palette. My video calls with Kenji Tanaka at Caltech became my lifeline to sanity. I would vent my frustrations, and he would counter them with the beautiful, calming logic of data. "She's complaining about the albedo of the dish," I fumed one evening. "Forget her. Heiress," Kenji said. his face alight with excitement. "I've been looking at the data you sent. That persistent absorption line you flagged in the 2.7 micron range. It's not noise. It's real. It's weak as hell. But it's there. Every time the planet makes its transit. What do you think it is?" "I don't know," I admitted, the frustration melting away, replaced by the familiar thrill of the unknown. "It's not aligning with any known stellar or interstellar gas signatures. It's an anomaly. And it's the most interesting thing I've seen in 20 years. This was the strange duality of my life. By day, I was fighting a losing battle of bureaucratic semantics with a woman who thought desert taupe was a color of profound importance. By night, I was hunting for the chemical fingerprints of another world. The sheer, cosmic absurdity of my situation was not lost on me. I was engaged in a conflict on two fronts, one against the vast, silent emptiness of space, and the other against the noisy, cluttered emptiness of a profoundly unhappy woman. And at that moment, I wasn't sure which one I was more likely to lose. My attempts at appeasement, particularly the offer to paint the dish, seemed to be interpreted by Meredith not as a concession, but as a sign of weakness. Her campaign escalated from the bureaucratic to the physical, from fines to felonious acts. She began a series of deniable, late-night attacks designed to cripple the observatory's function and my resolve. The first casualty was the observatory's main data conduit. It was a heavily shielded fiber optic cable that ran from the dish's primary receiver to my control room, buried 6 inches beneath the hard-packed desert soil. I came out one morning to find a section of the trench neatly dug up, and the cable itself severed with what looked like a pair of heavy-duty bolt cutters. The cut was clean, professional, and utterly malicious. My immediate reaction was a surge of white-hot anger, followed by a cold, familiar calm. This was a direct assault. My data stream was cut off. I knelt by the severed cable, my mind a flurry of calculations. The repair would take at least a day, meaning a full night of lost observation time. This was a critical period. The faint, anomalous signal I was tracking was only detectable during the planet's transit across its star, a window that lasted just a few hours every 2 days. Losing a night was a significant setback. I documented the damage with my camera, the timestamp on the photos a silent accusation. Then I got to work. Splicing fiber optic cable is a delicate, almost surgical procedure, one I had learned during a long-ago project in the Atacama Desert, where calling a technician was not an option. I spent the next 6 hours in the blazing sun, with a fusion splicer and a set of precision cleavers, meticulously aligning the microscopic glass fibers. As my hands worked, my mind raced. This was a clear escalation. She was no longer just trying to make the dish go away. She was trying to break it. My attempt to solve this, like a civilian, through letters and concessions, was a catastrophic failure. I was bringing diplomacy to a knife fight. That evening, I installed a network of discrete, motion-activated, low-light cameras. They were not for security in the traditional sense. They were for evidence. I felt a familiar, unpleasant pang of self-loathing as I hid the tiny lenses among the rocks. I was turning my sanctuary into a surveillance grid, bringing the tools of a world I despised into the heart of my peaceful retreat. But she had left me no choice. A week passed. The repaired cable functioned perfectly. Then, late one night, my system pinged me with an alert. I pulled up the feed on my laptop. A figure, dressed in dark clothing, was creeping around the foundation of the dish. It was Meredith. She was carrying a small bucket. I watched, my jaw clenched, as she opened an access panel on the main elevation drive, the complex motor that tilted the dish up and down and poured a mixture of sand and thick, viscous oil into the delicate gearing. I watched the entire act, my anger a cold, hard stone in my stomach. She finished, closed the panel, and crept away into the darkness. I now had her, dead to rights, on high-definition video, committing a felony. The old me, the ruthless political strategist my father had been, would have used it immediately, leaked it to the press, sent it to the district attorney. But as I sat there, the video playing on a loop, I found myself wrestling with a profound ethical dilemma. I was a scientist. My entire life was based on a process of patience, of gathering data, of waiting for a clear, undeniable signal to emerge from the noise. To release the video now felt premature. It was an emotional reaction, a tit-for-tat that would drag me down to her level. It would create a messy, public spectacle that would distract from my work, the very thing I was trying to protect. I saved the video to a secure, encrypted server. It was a crucial data point, but not the final one. I would repair the damage, as I had before. I would absorb this attack, as I had the others. My goal was not to win a petty feud with a sad, bitter woman. My goal was to listen to the stars. And I decided, in that moment, that I would not let her noise distract me from that signal. I would continue my work, continue to gather my evidence, and I would wait. I would wait for the moment when my own signal, the one I was chasing across hundreds of light years, was strong enough to silence hers forever. Having failed to disable my observatory through direct sabotage, Meredith's campaign entered its most poisonous phase. She turned her attention to my reputation, launching a systematic effort to isolate and demonize me within the community. Her chosen weapon was the Starfall Meadows online forum, a digital space she controlled with absolute authority, and she wielded it with the skill of a seasoned propagandist. Her first post was a masterpiece of veiled insinuation. Dear neighbors, it began. It has come to my attention that some residents have expressed concerns about potential health risks associated with the large, industrial-grade antenna recently installed. While I am not an expert, I have read that such devices can emit powerful electromagnetic fields. The board is taking these concerns very seriously and will be looking into the matter. The post was a lie wrapped in the language of responsible governance. It planted a seed of fear, and, in the closed, isolated ecosystem of Starfall Meadows, that seed found fertile ground. The comments below the post were a cascade of escalating paranoia. My Wi-Fi has been spotty ever since that thing was turned on. I've been having terrible migraines. Do you think it's related? We moved here to escape all that. For a natural life. A few days later, she followed with a new line of attack. This time, aimed at my character. A reminder to all residents that Starfall Meadows is a community built on transparency and trust. She wrote, "We pride ourselves on knowing our neighbors." The refusal of the owner of the new observatory to engage with the community, to explain the purpose of her secretive work, is deeply unsettling. One has to wonder what she is hiding. The effects of her digital smear campaign were immediate and tangible. The few neighbors who had been cautiously friendly now avoided my gaze entirely. A delivery driver told me he'd been asked a dozen questions about the secret government facility at the end of my road. The isolation was absolute. My internal conflict over how to respond was agonizing. As a scientist, my instinct was to counter her lies with data, with calm, rational explanations. But as a former student of political strategy, I knew that a direct rebuttal would be futile. It would be like trying to argue with a Twitter mob. Facts are irrelevant in a war of belief. I was discussing this dilemma with Kenji during one of our calls. She's running a classic disinformation campaign. I told him, the weariness evident in my voice. She successfully branded me as a radioactive hermit. The intellectual loneliness is profound. Then focus on the work. Eris, he urged, his voice a welcome anchor of sanity. Focus on the signal. Let that be your truth. He shared his screen, showing me a new analysis of the data from TRAPPIST-1E. Look, we've been running your raw data through the new atmospheric models. The absorption line at 2.7 microns. We think it might be dimethyl sulfide. I felt a jolt of pure, unadulterated excitement. Dimethyl sulfide. On Earth, DMS was produced almost exclusively by marine phytoplankton, abiotic, or non-living. Sources were virtually non-existent. It was one of the most sought-after and most elusive potential biosignatures. Are you sure, Kenji? I breathed, leaning closer to my screen. The confidence level is still only at 3 sigma, he cautioned, referring to the statistical measure used to denote certainty. It could still be a data artifact or an unknown chemical process. We need more data, a much stronger signal. To be sure. But Eris, if it's real, this is it. The knowledge was both exhilarating and terrifying. I was sitting on what could be the most important scientific discovery in history, while simultaneously being treated as a pariah by my own community. The dissonance was staggering. It was this knowledge that forced my hand. I had to fight back, not for my own sake, but for the sake of the data. I decided to make one attempt to appeal to reason. I wrote a calm, carefully worded letter to every resident in Starfall Meadows. I bypassed Meredith's forum and sent it via the postal service. In the letter, I introduced myself, explained my background, and described my research in simple, accessible terms. I explicitly stated that my observatory was a passive, receive-only instrument and posed no health risks. I ended by inviting the entire community to an open observatory night, where I would give a tour, explain my work, and answer any questions they might have. The response was a deafening silence. Out of 50 households, not a single person replied. 2 days later, a new post from Meredith appeared on the forum. It seems our secretive neighbor has attempted to circumvent the board with a disingenuous letter full of technical jargon. Please do not be fooled by this transparent attempt to normalize her dangerous and disruptive activities. The board advises all residents to disregard her invitation. Her control was absolute. She had successfully censored me and intercepted my attempt at outreach. My final, peaceful appeal to reason had been crushed. I sat in my control room that night, the silence of my empty house, a mirror of the vast, cold silence between the stars. My isolation was complete, and I knew, with a grim finality, that my next move could not be one of peace, but one of overwhelming, undeniable force. Meredith's final, decisive move was exactly what I had anticipated. Having successfully isolated me and established a narrative of me as a dangerous outsider, she weaponized the legal system. She used the fear and suspicion she had cultivated to rally the community and launch a full-scale legal assault designed to achieve her ultimate goal, the complete and total eradication of my observatory. A humorless process server delivered the lawsuit to my doorstep. It was a thick, professionally prepared document filed on behalf of the Starfall Meadows HOA. It was a compendium of all her previous lies, now codified in the formal, intimidating language of the law. It accused me of creating a public nuisance, of violating a dozen different bylaws, of causing a significant and demonstrable decline in property values, and of inflicting severe emotional distress upon the community. The lawsuit demanded a permanent injunction that would legally compel me to dismantle and remove the observatory at my own expense. But the more immediate and catastrophic threat was buried in a secondary motion, a request for a preliminary injunction, with a court hearing scheduled in just 14 days. If granted, this would force me to immediately cease all operations and power down the entire facility until the main lawsuit, a process that could drag on for years, was concluded. The timing was a death blow. My research into the atmosphere of TRAPPIST-1E had reached a critical make-or-break moment. The faint, tantalizing signal of dimethyl sulfide was beginning to strengthen as I refined my data collection techniques. But to achieve the 5 sigma level of statistical certainty required for a scientific discovery to be considered definitive, I needed a long, unbroken chain of observation. A court-ordered shutdown, even for a few weeks, would be a disaster. It would create a fatal gap in my data, potentially rendering months of work useless. I sat in my control room, the lawsuit on one side of my desk, the faint, flickering graph of the potential biosignature on the other. This was the ultimate conflict, the petty, earthbound rules of man versus the quiet, profound pursuit of universal truth. My internal war reached its climax. My entire professional life had been dedicated to a rigorous, patient, and methodical process. Science, real science, was a slow and cautious march, not a frantic sprint. Rushing to publish, making a grand announcement based on incomplete data, was a cardinal sin. It was the territory of charlatans and glory seekers, the very academic culture I had retired to escape. But what was the alternative to adhere to my principles? To wait for the slow process of verification to unfold, only to have a judge who didn't know the difference between a radio wave and a microwave shut it all down. To let this signal, this incredible whisper from another world, be silenced forever because of a dispute over aesthetics. I looked at the photograph of Carl Sagan on my wall. He had been a brilliant showman, but he had also been a brilliant scientist who understood that sometimes, to protect the science, you had to engage with the messy, illogical world of human beings. My decision was made. It felt like a betrayal of my own deeply held principles, a compromise of my scientific soul. But the stakes were too high for purity. I picked up the phone. "Kenji," I said, my voice low and intense. "The doomsday clock is ticking. I have 13 days until a court hearing that will shut me down. We are accelerating the timeline." "Eris, that's not possible," he protested. "The data is still too noisy. No reputable journal would even look at this. We'd be a laughingstock." "Then, we are bypassing the journals," I said, the words tasting like acid. "I am sending you my entire raw data archive. Right now. I'm also sending you my private key to access the observation logs of the Arecibo and Green Bank observatories, the ones I have discretionary access to. I need you to pull in every favor we have. I need you to assemble a small, trusted team of the best spectral analysts in the world. You have 1 week to independently verify my findings. No peer review, no publication, a direct, internal confirmation." And then what Kenji asked, his voice a whisper. "And then," I said, my eyes fixed on the pale, beautiful light of the screen, "you will help me orchestrate the most important press conference in the history of science. We're not just going to win this argument. Kenji, we're going to make the argument, and everyone who supported it, look so small that they simply cease to exist." The community clubhouse at Starfall Meadows, with its exposed beams and panoramic desert views, was designed to evoke a sense of rustic harmony. On this day, however, it felt like an arena. Meredith had called a mandatory HOA meeting, the sole purpose of which was to secure a formal community vote authorizing the lawsuit against me. It was a piece of political theater, a rally designed to demonstrate her absolute control and to savor her impending victory. She stood at a heavy wooden podium, the very picture of a righteous crusader. She spoke passionately about protecting the pristine visual landscape and the sanctity of our natural quiet. She painted me as an arrogant outsider who had trampled on their shared values. Her speech was a symphony of her greatest hits, and her audience, the same neighbors who had ignored my letters and shunned me in public, was rapt. "This lawsuit is our last stand," she concluded, her voice ringing with emotion. "It is a message that we will not allow the soul of Starfall Meadows to be corrupted. I urge you to vote yes and reclaim our valley." A wave of determined applause filled the room. She was glowing, soaking in the adoration. She raised a gavel to call for the vote, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. At that moment, I stood up. "Excuse me, Mrs. Finch," I said, my voice calm but carrying easily in the suddenly silent room. "Before you proceed, there is a video call I need to take, given that it directly pertains to the community impact of my observatory. I think it's only fair that you all hear it." Meredith's smile faltered, replaced by a look of annoyed suspicion. "We are not interested in your games, Dr. Thorne." "This isn't a game," I said. I tapped the screen of my tablet and projected the incoming video call onto a large, white screen on the wall behind the podium. The face that appeared was that of my colleague, Kenji Tanaka, looking exhausted but electric with excitement. He was not alone. Standing beside him was a woman whose face was instantly recognizable to anyone with even a passing interest in science. Dr. Elena Ramirez, the formidable and deeply respected director of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. "Eris, can you hear us?" Kenji's voice filled the room. Loud and clear. "Kenji," I said, "you are addressing the residents of Starfall Meadows." Dr. Ramirez stepped forward. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice calm and authoritative. "My name is Dr. Elena Ramirez. I am the director of JPL. I am speaking to you today from a hastily arranged press briefing at the California Institute of Technology. We are here to announce a discovery of historic significance." A confused murmur rippled through the room. Meredith stared at the screen, her face a mask of disbelief. "For the past several months," Dr. Ramirez continued, "an independent research facility located in your community, the Starfall Observatory, under the direction of Dr. Eris Thorne, has been conducting a detailed analysis of the exoplanet TRAPPIST-1e. Today, after an intensive, week-long verification process involving research teams from JPL, Caltech, and MIT, we are ready to announce their findings." She paused, and the silence in the room was so profound it felt like a physical weight. Dr. Thorne's observatory has provided the first-ever, statistically significant evidence of a potential biosignature in the atmosphere of an Earth-like exoplanet. Specifically, she has detected a persistent and significant presence of dimethyl sulfide, a gas which on our own planet is produced almost exclusively by biological processes. She held up a hand to forestall the inevitable misunderstanding. "Now, let me be clear. This is not a confirmation of extraterrestrial life. There may be unknown abiotic processes that could produce this gas. But what this is the single most promising and significant piece of evidence in the search for life beyond Earth that humanity has ever uncovered. It is a monumental discovery that will shape the course of scientific inquiry for decades to come. Kenji stepped forward, his face beaming. Auris, your paper. Spectrographic analysis of potential biosignatures in the atmosphere of TRAPPIST-1e was uploaded to the public archive server an hour ago. The world's press has been notified. The story is breaking as we speak. Dr. Ramirez spoke one last time. The Starfall Observatory is now, without exaggeration, the most important astronomical site on the planet. Its work is of critical importance to NASA and to the future of science. We will be petitioning the National Science Foundation to have the site designated a zone of critical scientific interest. And we trust that the local community will do everything in its power to support and protect this invaluable global resource. The video feed ended, leaving her image lingering on the screen. The room was utterly silent. The lawsuit, the fines, the talk of aesthetic harmony, all of it had been vaporized, rendered cosmically and laughably insignificant. Meredith Finch stood frozen at her podium, a small, petty figure in the harsh glare of a monumental truth. She had picked a fight over her backyard fence, only to discover that the yard was the entire universe. The justice that Meredith Finch faced was not legal, but existential. In the wake of the announcement, the lawsuit against me was withdrawn so quickly and quietly, it was as if it had never existed. The HOA's lawyers, no doubt horrified at the prospect of being publicly positioned as the firm that tried to sue the woman who might have discovered extraterrestrial life, dropped the case pro bono. Meredith's world crumbled, not with a bang, but with a quiet, collective turning of backs. She became a pariah in the community she had fought so obsessively to control. She was the woman who, through her own petty ignorance, had almost robbed Starfall Meadows and the world of a historic discovery. The board demanded her immediate resignation. An audit of the HOA's finances, initiated by the residents she had duped into supporting her vendetta, revealed she had spent tens of thousands of dollars in community funds on her legal crusade. Faced with social ostracism and the demand that she personally reimburse the association, she and her husband sold their home and moved away, vanishing into a well-deserved and anonymous obscurity. Her failed legacy was now forever cemented. She was a footnote of opposition in the story of a great discovery. My life, and the life of the community, was transformed. Starfall Meadows, once an isolated enclave of wealthy recluses, became a place of pilgrimage for scientists, students, and journalists. The HOA, under new and humbled leadership, rewrote the covenants. The new centerpiece of their code was a clause dedicating the community to the protection and support of the Starfall Observatory and its vital scientific mission. The National Science Foundation, in partnership with JPL, awarded my observatory a multi-million-dollar grant, which I used to upgrade my equipment and build a small, modest educational center for local schools. My work, once a solitary pursuit, was now a collaborative effort with the world's greatest minds. I found the peace I had craved. But it was a different kind of peace than I had imagined. It was not a peace of isolation, but a peace of profound purpose. My quiet has been replaced by the hum of important work. My loneliness by a global community of fellow seekers. Most nights, I still sit alone in my control room, my great dish turned to the sky, listening. The signal from TRAPPIST-1e is stronger now, clearer. It is a constant, humbling reminder that the universe is full of incredible things waiting to be known, and that the greatest barrier to discovery is not the vastness of space, but the smallness of our own minds.